Geoff Mosher, FanRag Sports, covers the Eagles. And Geoff will bring him into the conversation and get his thought on it. The Eagles are 8-1. Is it Roseman? Is it Wentz? Is it Peterson? Is it something else that you give, Geoff, the most credit for this team being 8-1?
That's a tough question. I'm still trying to calculate and figure out in my head how many hours of sleep Pete's going to get tonight after watching all those games that are going to be up late. And now I got to figure out who's most. Now I got to figure out who's most responsible for 8-1. I mean, geez. I would say this, and then the beauty of this team, right, is that it's not like that Patriots team all that years ago that was so good that lost the Giants, where there's so many superstars, right? There's a superstar in Carson Wentz, and then there's Fletcher Cox, who's a kind of a quiet star in that he's a DT, but there's just so many different guys, like guys like Patrick Robinson or Nigel Bradham, or Vinnie Curry, Derek Barnett, so many different guys that are playing at really high levels that it's hard to just say who's the most responsible. But if of the choices you gave me, if I had to pick one, I would probably take Carson, because he's the quarterback. It's year 2, and he's the one that's really just, you look at the stats on third down, and you look at how dominant he's been in some other elements of the game. And, quarterbacks can make coaches and GMs look really good. You don't always say that vice versa, right? You don't always say, hey, that GM and coach make the quarterback look good. But I think in this case, the quarterback of all the people probably should get the most credit.
Yeah, obviously, when you have a quarterback, Geoff, and, you cover the league, you see them all over the place. The teams that have the good quarterback, they make the playoffs. And the team that has the exceptionally good quarterback for that particular year, they win the Super Bowl, or they make it. I mean, Matt Ryan is not playing well this year. The Falcons are average. He was the MVP of the league last year. They went to the Super Bowl. Cam Newton was the MVP of the league. They went to the Super Bowl. Last year he did not play well. They didn't make the playoffs. It's a pretty high correlation. If you have a good quarterback, you make the playoffs. And if you have an exceptional quarterback, you'll win the thing.
Yeah, and that's why when we talk about the Eagles at 8-1, as surprising as it is, it doesn't seem flukish right now. I mean, don't you agree that we've seen this happen now over 9 games, and it seems like Carson gets better and better, that you feel like you're witnessing something that's real, like a transformation, an emergence, an arrival. And that's why I don't think it's so crazy now at 8-1 to think, you know what? You look around the NFC, you see Aaron Rodgers out, you see the Seahawks struggling, and you think, hey, maybe this could be the year that the Eagles are in the NFC Championship game, if not the Super Bowl. Whereas, maybe in past years, you're like, no, there's something not right about it. But the guy just plays at such a high level, and he's really answered the bell every time that until I'm proven otherwise, until you see Carson have 2 really bad games in a row, or the Eagles have those clunkers that they would have every once in a while under Andy Reid, right? Until that happens, I'll just say, hey, they're playing that good. Right. They deserve every accolade they get.
Well, and Geoff, the last couple of years, the Falcons kind of came out of nowhere and became the best team in the NFC. You didn't really predict them at the beginning of the year. Same with Carolina. You can make the argument that no one really picked Philadelphia at the beginning of the year, and that they have that something that those teams had the last couple of years. They feel like they have more staying power, though, because you believe in this quarterback more maybe than Matt Ryan. Not that Matt Ryan stinks, but he's been in the league for a while, and he's had some good years, but he's never been an MVP candidate. Same with Cam Newton. These guys just kind of came out and had these MVP-type seasons and then came back to life. I think you're right. There's something about Wentz that you believe in that makes you feel like this year can be special, but that they also have staying power because of him. And that's why I think Wentz overshadows the coach, because not that Ron Rivera is a bad coach, but you don't bring him up as the top 10 guy off the tip of your tongue. And same with, I can't even think of the guy down in Atlanta right now. That's how little, regard that they have. But that's why I have Wentz over Peterson.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And listen, I don't know what's going to happen next year. I do think they'll have staying power because of the quarterback. Now, I don't know per se that they can't be kind of like what you're saying, Atlanta and Carolina next year, and take a step back a little bit, because let's face it, they have 18 guys on, with 1 year left on their deal. I don't know that they're going to be able to keep both Alshon Jeffrey and Tim Jernigan and bring back Nigel Bradham and I don't know, some of the other guys who are 1 year deals that I can't think of right now or at the end of it. So who knows? That's why I would almost say it's, even though they're a little bit arriving before they're supposed to, I would say it's kind of, it would be great if they could win it this year. Not just obviously because it's been so long, but also because you just never know what next year is going to look like. You never know who's going to improve. You never know if Aaron Rodgers comes back healthy and all of a sudden they're a juggernaut again. So there's a lot of things that are riding in their favor right now, which it makes it, I don't want to say urgent. The urgency is there because it's just year 2 for both Doug and Carson, but there certainly is an opportunity here that probably isn't presented every kind of year.
So, Geoff, on our Twitter poll, we had other, but Mike and I both agreed that Jim Schwartz could be maybe the 4th guy or included in that. How much, what role does Jim Schwartz have in all the Eagles' success and their 8-1 start in your mind?
Oh, I think a lot of it. And, again, it's hard to just find one guy who hasn't really improved in some form or fashion, and that's not just players, but it's also coaches, right? And it's not per se that Jim has improved, but he certainly has made more of his personnel, more use of his personnel in year 2 than he did last year. He blitzes a little bit more, and there's certainly been much more timely this year, right? I mean, he's figured out ways to use about 17 different players at times, and that's really been a benefit to this defense and why they've been able to withstand injuries so far to some really important players. It's because other guys have been getting time and other guys have been put in certain roles and they've been able to flourish in it. And I think Michael Kendricks is a great example of that, right? I mean, Michael Kendricks, everybody said, why don't you use him more last year? We get that he's limited. We get that he doesn't fit everything you want to do, but he's got athleticism, he's got talent. And you'll see Michael Kendricks, even before the Hicks injury, was on the field more, was used more as a blitzer, which is what his strengths are. Vinny Curry is the guy who's come back this year and played well, and Jim has done a great job, I think, in figuring out the best defensive line rotations. Curry plays first and second down. Derek Barnett comes in on third down a lot. When you look at their stats altogether, no one's really leading the league in top 3 in sacks or pressures or hits or anything, but together as an entire line, which is really what Jim presides over and his strength, they've been unbelievable. I mean, they cause so much pressure without getting, sacks that they're literally winning the intimidation battle against these quarterbacks before the game starts.
Yeah, I saw your post.
Hoarse, guys. I don't know if you could tell.
I wasn't sure if you'd stopped or if you were getting ready to cough, so I was going to jump in and say that I saw your post about the Eagles D linemen. I'll give you a minute to catch your breath there, and how they're outperforming some of the NFL's best pass rushers, and you have those combos out there. I mean, the Eagles, so I guess what you're saying is they're doing it without the signature combo that jumps right out. It's more a collective effort that's getting the job done, but that's sometimes more effective than these duos that get all the praise and the hype.
Yeah, like a lot of the guys like Barnett and Cox and Curry have a decent number of quarterback hits, a decent number of sacks, like Brandon Graham too, maybe 5, 4.5 sacks, 3.5 sacks, 7 hits, 7 or 8 tackles for a loss. And that's not league leader, but you remember these guys rotate so much. So what I wound up doing is taking their numbers in those 3 categories, sacks, tackles for a loss, and quarterback hits, and then dividing it by the number of snaps that they played and comparing that to guys who have played more snaps than them. So I did it by a per snap basis, and those guys were, if you kind of project or prorate their QB hits, sacks, and tackles for loss to the number of snaps that, say, Justin Houston or Khalil Mack has played or Von Miller played, you'll see that they're very comparable, if not better. In some cases, they're better. Guys like Vinny Curry is an example I use. He's actually got more quarterback hits per snap than Justin Houston and Khalil Mack and I think Chandler Jones and some of those guys that you see up on the leaderboard right now for those categories.
Geoff Mosher, FanRag Sports, covers the Eagles. And, by the way, he writes about other things, and the Eagles had a great piece on Roy Halladay. Check that out. Some stuff on the Sixers as well. But, this is an Eagles town. People are jacked up about this Eagles team, and with good reason, by the way. They're 8-1. Do you see the second half? There's still 7 games left. They were 5-4 last year. They were in the thick of the playoff race, Geoff. But this second half, because you're 8-1 and everything seems to be going well, it almost seems like there's blinders on that there could be roadblocks. But Dallas coming out of the bye, you're at Seattle, you're at L.A., which back in April, who would have thought playing at L.A. would have been a problem? And then you got, the Raiders on Christmas night. Playing on a wonky night is never, the Eagles have had all sorts of problems playing on these Saturday night games the last couple of years. Playing on Christmas night, a little odd. And then, obviously, you've got the New Year's Eve game against Dallas. So this season can take a turn. I'm not saying they might not make the playoffs, but you're not locking home field advantage in an NFC East title up at 8-1.
No, not at all. Although I would say this, you go down to Dallas, right, and win next week in that game, and even though there's still a lot of games left to play, I think that would be – let's say Dallas wins this week, right? The Eagles still have a 2-game up. So if they then play each other on November 19th and the Eagles win, they go 3-up on Dallas and stay unbeaten in the division and then have that 1-game lead on Dallas. I'm not going to say it's a wrap right there, but I would feel about as confident can be that the Eagles win the division if they win that game. 'Cause they could even probably end up splitting in the end with Dallas and not have to sweat it. So, and imagine if Dallas loses to Atlanta this weekend and the Eagles win that game, then you're up 4, if I'm not mistaken, if the math is right there. So if the Eagles beat Dallas after that. So that would almost put the division really locked down. So that there might be a lot of stakes in that game. There will definitely be ramifications, and the stakes will be high, but could be even higher depending on what happens this weekend in that game. But you're right. To your point, Mike, you're right. I mean, listen, they've done really well, but the last 2 weeks we're talking about beating C.J. Beathard and we're talking about beating Brock Osweiler, right? I mean, in this coming up, it's not just 2 games against Dallas. It's the upstart LA Rams, who you can make an argument that have just been as impressive and as surprising as the Eagles have. Seattle will obviously be a difficult game. Who knows? I suspect, I could be wrong, but I suspect about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about the Raiders a little bit differently. I think they're going to start to get their act together a little bit, and that Christmas game will be pretty interesting. But, I mean, realistically, the Eagles go 500 over their final 8 games here, they'll be fine. But everybody will be disappointed because they'll only be 500 in those 8 games. It'll be interesting to see how this thing unfolds.
Hey, Moshe, from my seat in 135 at the link where I was on Sunday in the fan section there, cheering like a fan, Jay Ajayi didn't need much time to make an impact. He came right to our end zone on that big 46-yarder. But do you think he'll have more of an impact these final 7 games?
If he's not, there should be an investigation into something going on. You know, you give him a 4th-round pick, you brought him in. I know LeGarrette Blount is the quote-unquote starter, but he's the best running back you got. So it would be shocking to me if by the end of the year, if Jay Ajayi wasn't the primary ball carrier.
Now, they keep putting it out there that LeGarrette's the primary guy, but how much credit do you give then to a guy like Deuce? Because do you think that he kind of is able to manage that room and sort of massage it? Because there's egos involved, not just athletic ability, right?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question because we were talking to Deuce yesterday. They made the assistants available. And if you go back to 2003 when they were a committee with Westbrook and Deuce and Carell, Deuce didn't love that. You know, Deuce wanted the ball all the time, and he didn't really get a thrill out of having to share it with the 2 younger stallions that the Eagles had brought in at the time. And now he finds himself trying to convince 5 running backs that this is a good thing, this committee idea. And he talked about that and the dichotomy now as a coach and how he feels about it. But he's got no issues, and he says the number one thing is that they're all focused on winning a championship or winning as many games as possible, and they're putting egos aside. And that's great. You know, that's also coach speak for now. But I suspect that if the winning continues, then egos will be set aside.
All right, Geoff Mosher, FanRag Sports, covers the Eagles who have the bye this week. And obviously, as you mentioned, Geoff, you got Dallas in action this week. I want to ask you real quick, though, about the rest of the division. We know New York at 1-7 is buried, but Washington did go on the road and won at Seattle. Do you think that they still have some life?
Yeah, I think Washington certainly has life. I mean, I was one of the more outspoken kind of guys saying I think Washington's a pretty good team going into the year. And what are they? They have a winning record, right? Are they 5-4?
I think they're 4-4. I think they're 4-4.
4-4. All right, but 2 of their losses have come to the Eagles. So
let me double check.
The Eagles are the best team. Yeah,
4-4. Yeah, 4-4.
4-4 with 2 losses coming to the best team in football. They beat Washington with a ton of injuries. I think they beat the Rams, if I'm not mistaken. They went out to the West Coast and beat the Rams week 2 or 3. So
week 2, I think. Yep.
To me. Yeah, I think they're legit. I just think that the Eagles have been better, and that just shows you how good the Eagles have been. So do I think that they're a threat to win the division over the Eagles now? It's going to be really hard, right? 0-2 in the whole, just on tiebreaker alone in division. So, but can they make the playoffs? We'll see. You know, I think they're a good team.
This NFC is interesting. I bought
beat
into
the Rams and beat the Raiders back-to-back, by the way. The Rams was in Los Angeles. The Raiders were home, but beating those two teams
That's
back-to-back.
good, yeah. Now, I bought into the Rams a couple of weeks
ago.
I bought into the Rams a couple of weeks ago. We do who's in, who's out on Tuesdays. I've had them win in the West for about 4 weeks now. They don't need to sell me on anything more. That team's pretty good. The Saints 6-2, Carolina 6-3. You got the Seahawks still in there. The Vikings 6-2, Dallas, Washington. This NFC is going to be very interesting over these last 7 games. Is there a team? Because Geoff, the Rams, the Saints, the Vikings, they all didn't make the playoffs last year. So is there a team in there that you're not buying of these newbies that are kind of reared their head into this NFC race this year?
I guess, and I hate saying it because I feel like everybody will say it. It's really hard to buy the Vikings because their quarterback, like they don't know who their quarterback is on a week-to-week basis. So how many of those teams really, go all the way and win a Super Bowl or win playoff games? I mean, they've got Case Keenum. I don't know when Sam Bradford's coming back. So that to me is the one team that I kind of scratch my head at. The one team that I feel like, it's kind of that normal home team hypocrisy that goes on. I hear Eagles fans say, like, the Rams are no threat. I'm like, if you're going to consider yourselves threats, right, then you should consider the Rams equal threats. Just because you have one more win doesn't mean you're, like, 10 times better than them. They're a good team. They've proven that. They've scored, 50 points 3 times already this year? I think something crazy like that. So I believe in them. I mean, they're as much an upstart as the Eagles are and a surprise as the Eagles are, and I think that the game that they're going to play in 6 or 7 weeks is going to be fascinating.
Sure is. Geoff Mosher, and check him out at Geoff Mosher NFL on Twitter, and, of course, right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Every Thursday we talk Eagles football. Geoff, always enjoyed it, pal. Take care.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you next week.